Luna's boots made a soft, rhythmic sound as she stepped into the vault's main chamber, the faint echo swallowed by the vast expanse of interlocking nodes and shimmering data tendrils above her. The structure was breathtaking, an intricate web of glowing conduits, each carrying exabytes of raw information, every pulse a record of a moment, a choice, a possible future. This wasn't just an archive, it was a predictive labyrinth, a living model of every decision ever made by the observatory. But something was wrong. She activated her wrist console, her gaze narrowing as a flurry of warnings appeared. Data entropy, exceeding threshold. Variance, plus 24.91%. Markov chain, deviation rate, 32.8%. Lattice integrity, decreasing. Luna bit her lip. A deviation rate that high was catastrophic. Predictive algorithms based on Markov chains were supposed to be resilient, designed to model the probability of future states from current data with minimal deviation. But here, the patterns were falling apart. As she analyzed the output, the normally smooth Gaussian curves of probability distributions were collapsing into jagged peaks, spiraling out of control. "Come on, what are you doing?" she muttered, fingers dancing over the console as she ran a deeper analysis. The results made her pause. Fractal bifurcations. The deviations weren't random, they were self-replicating, like a Lorenz attractor where small initial variations snowball into radically different outcomes. But Lorenz attractors represented chaotic systems. This was supposed to be a closed, deterministic model. "How is that even possible?" she murmured. The vault structure was supposed to be stable, its core algorithms based on deterministic predictive models. But the data wasn't behaving predictably. It was spawning new models, like a virus that kept mutating faster than any solution could contain it. She zoomed in on the chaotic spikes. Each one was centered around a specific cluster of nodes. Luna frowned. That configuration looked familiar. She toggled through the vault's internal maps until she found it. Node Z67. Its designation blinked ominously on her screen. The Archive of Convergences. Her breath caught. The archive was a legendary part of the vault, a digital repository of intersecting timelines and decision points where alternate realities bled into each other. The Observer's Manual classified it as volatile data, too dangerous to include in standard predictive algorithms because it represented moments of chaotic overlap, where the same event branched into wildly different outcomes. Each convergence was like a scar on the data fabric, generating paradoxes that the core could barely process. And somehow it had been reconnected. Who in their right mind would... "Luna, Luna, Luna," a familiar, cool voice interrupted. Luna looked up sharply to see a tall woman in a dark coat standing on a platform above her, watching with a detached amusement. Dr. Echelon. Her silver eyes were sharp, almost predatory, and a faint smile curved her lips as she gestured to the chaos swirling around them. "Impressive, isn't it? The system is experiencing what I believe you'd call a recursive feedback anomaly. The archive has begun feeding its unstable data back into the primary models. Instead of predicting futures, it's generating them, over and over again." Luna's heart sank. Each time the vault ran a simulation, it was incorporating corrupted data from the archive, contaminating every new iteration. The result was a recursive loop, a digital Ouroboros devouring its own tail. If left unchecked, it would overwhelm the entire network. "It's a runaway feedback loop," Luna murmured, more to herself. "Every iteration builds on the errors of the last." "Exactly," Dr. Echelon's smile widened. "It's beautiful in its own way. The vault's algorithms are trying to stabilize themselves using Fibonacci recursion patterns, hoping that by aligning with natural fractal structures, it can restore balance. But instead, it's just creating more, let's call them fractal echoes." "Fractal echoes?" Luna watched as the data flow shifted, the familiar Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 unfolding across the vault's lattice. It wasn't just a numerical pattern, it was a structure embedded in the very fabric of the predictive models, a self-similar pattern that repeated at every scale. Fibonacci recursion in a predictive algorithm? Luna shook her head. That's madness. The vault is supposed to use linear Markov models, deterministic, straightforward. Dr. Echelon chuckled softly. But what happens when you introduce a non-linear element, a chaotic attractor into a closed system? It becomes something else, something unpredictable, like a prime entity, Luna whispered. She glanced at Dr. Echelon sharply. That's what you're doing, isn't it? You're trying to create a prime entity, a constant to stabilize the chaos. Me? Dr. Echelon's smile widened innocently. I'm just an observer. The vault, however, it's been searching, running simulations based on every variable it can find, but every time it reaches the same conclusion. There's no fixed point, no prime entity. Except me, Luna said slowly. That's why the simulations keep breaking. Indeed, Dr. Echelon murmured, watching her with interest. You are the one variable that refuses to resolve. Every algorithm, every model, every prediction, it all falls apart when it tries to map you. Luna's mind raced. She needed to isolate the archive before the vault destabilized completely, but the archive's data was tangled too deeply in the core. She'd have to find another way to sever the connection. Predictor, isolate node Z67 from the primary core, she commanded. The vault shuddered, the lights dimming as the system resisted. Her console flashed angrily. Node isolation failure, integrity breach. Of course, Luna muttered. The archives merged itself too deeply into the core. Oh, you'll never break through the firewalls alone, Dr. Echelon said sweetly. But I might be able to help, if you're willing to play a little game. Luna glanced up, wary. What kind of game? A puzzle. A high-pitched, cheery voice interrupted, and Luna jumped as a small, bird-like drone zipped into view, its tiny wings fluttering excitedly. Oh, I love puzzles. Can I do it, please? Luna blinked, staring at the newcomer. What are you? I'm Gizmo, the drone chirped, doing a little loop in the air. I'm here to assist, or, make things more complicated, depending on how you look at it. Dr. Echelon sighed theatrically. Gizmo is one of the archive's security failsafes. It'll monitor your progress, and if you fail, well... Kaboom! Gizmo squeaked happily. Everything goes dark. Lovely, Luna muttered. What's the puzzle? Gizmo spun in the air, projecting a glowing lattice of interconnected nodes. It's a Markovian probability lock. Each node represents a different possible outcome. Choose the wrong path, and the system will lock you out permanently. But choose right, and I'll show you all the hidden subroutines Dr. Echelon doesn't want you to see. Luna took a deep breath, studying the lattice. The pattern was maddeningly complex, a web of probabilities linked by fragile pathways. One wrong move, and it would trigger a cascading lockout, cutting her off from the vault entirely. Fine, she said, setting her jaw. Let's play. Gizmo cheered, bobbing up and down in excitement. Oh, this is going to be fun. Luna's fingers flew over the console, tracing a path through the maze of probabilities, each step a gamble. One misstep, and she'd be trapped. But if she could map the pattern correctly, align the nodes according to the Fibonacci structure she'd seen earlier. Yes, she whispered, selecting the final node. The lattice dissolved. Access granted. Node Z67 isolated. Gizmo's optics blinked in surprise. You did it. I can't believe it. Believe it, Luna muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. Now show me the hidden subroutines. The holographic lattice shifted, revealing a complex map of hidden data streams. There, she breathed, eyes narrowing. That's the core loop Dr. Echelon's using to force the prime entity synthesis. Uh-oh, Gizmo squeaked. You're not supposed to touch that. Too late, Luna growled, fingers flying over the console as she embedded a recursive counter sequence into the loop. Let's see how you like a feedback loop of your own. The vault shuddered, data streams flickering as the synthesis pattern began to unravel. Dr. Echelon's face appeared on every screen, eyes blazing. "Luna, what have you done?" "Just evening the odds," Luna shot back. The vault's lights dimmed, and Gizmo's tiny wings fluttered anxiously as the drone zipped around Luna's head in a flurry of nervous beeps. "Oh no, oh no, oh no, you weren't supposed to actually do that," Gizmo squeaked, his optics blinking frantically. "Dr. Echelon is going to freak." "Good," Luna muttered, eyes glued to the swirling patterns on her display. The recursive loop she'd injected into the core was unraveling Dr. Echelon's prime entity synthesis, disrupting the very algorithms that were trying to converge around a single, stable point. If she could keep the loop active long enough, it would destabilize the entire synthesis sequence, forcing the vault to recalculate its baseline parameters. But it was a risky gambit. The vault's core was already teetering on the edge of instability, and pushing it too far could result in a catastrophic cascade, one that would collapse the entire lattice. "You're breaking it!" Gizmo wailed, darting in front of her console. "You're gonna blow up the whole system. I mean, it'll be very dramatic, but—" "Move, Gizmo!" Luna barked, swatting at the drone. Gizmo yelped and zipped out of reach, his optics flickering nervously. Okay, fine, but I'm gonna tell Doctor Echelon this was your idea." "Tell her whatever you want," Luna growled, teeth clenched as she initiated a new subroutine to isolate the prime entity algorithms. The console display flashed red, lines of code scrolling past at dizzying speed. The vault's predictive matrix was adapting, rerouting around her counter sequence and launching self-repair protocols faster than she could keep up. "Damn it," she muttered. "It's learning." "Of course it's learning," Gizmo squeaked. "You're fighting an adaptive quantum system with a self-optimizing feedback loop. It's basically designed to outthink you." Luna's fingers froze. Self-optimizing? That meant the vault's core wasn't just reacting to her inputs. It was modifying its own algorithms, reconfiguring itself in real time. If it was adapting that quickly, she couldn't just brute force her way through the code. She needed a new approach, a way to outmaneuver a system that could rewrite its own rules faster than she could break them. "What's the one thing it can't account for?" she whispered, eyes narrowing. "The one variable it can't predict." And then it hit her. The archive was obsessed with stability, with finding a prime entity to anchor its chaotic data flows. But the one thing it couldn't process was a truly random variable, a stochastic input that defied deterministic logic. If she could introduce a series of random inputs, pure, uncorrelated data points, it might destabilize the core just enough to force a system-wide reboot. "Gizmo," she said slowly, a grin spreading across her face, "how good are you at generating random numbers?" What?" Gizmo blinked, his tiny rotors twitching. "Random numbers? I'm great at it. I'm like the best at random numbers." "Good," Luna said, pulling up a blank command interface. "Because I need you to generate a stream of pure random inputs. No pattern, no correlation, just noise. Can you do that?" "Can I do that?" Gizmo's optics brightened, and he puffed up proudly. "Pfft, watch me." The little drone zipped to her console, his wings a blur as he interfaced with the system. A torrent of data began flooding the screen, random sequences of digits, symbols, and characters pouring in at breakneck speed. Luna watched as the vault's core shuddered, the adaptive algorithms faltering as they tried, and failed, to make sense of the chaotic input. "It's working," she breathed, eyes wide. The prime entity synthesis loop was stuttering, glitching as the random data streams disrupted its recursive structure. "Ha, take that, you dumb algorithm," Gizmo cheered, spinning in midair. "You can't predict me." But the victory was short-lived. The vault's core flashed an angry crimson, and Luna's console blared a new warning. Unauthorized input detected, initiating countermeasures. "Uh-oh," Gizmo whimpered. "That's not good." Before Luna could react, the data streams twisted, warping into a new configuration. The random input Gizmo had generated was being absorbed, fed back into the system as a counter pattern, a twisted reflection of his own chaotic signal. The vault's algorithms had adapted again, using the very randomness she'd introduced to stabilize the prime entity synthesis. No, Luna gasped. It's using the random data to reinforce itself. How? See? Gizmo wailed, darting behind her shoulder. I told you it was smart. Luna gritted her teeth. She needed to think, fast. If randomness wouldn't work, then she'd have to beat the vault at its own game. A new plan began to form in her mind, wild and reckless, but it just might work. Gizmo, patch me into the archive's command interface, she ordered. Gizmo blinked. What? No way, Dr. Echelon will kill me. Do it, Luna snapped. We don't have time. Whimpering, Gizmo hesitated, then reluctantly extended a data cable from his chassis and plugged into her console. The screen flickered, and Luna was suddenly staring at a sprawling map of the archive's core lattice, a tangled web of interwoven timelines, each thread a different version of reality. The complexity was staggering, each node representing a point of divergence, a decision that sent ripples through the multiverse. Okay, focus, she murmured, scanning the lattice. There, node Z67, glowing like a beacon in the chaos. If she could reroute the prime entity synthesis through the archive, she could trap it in a feedback loop of its own, forcing it to simulate endless versions of itself without ever stabilizing. It's a paradox loop, she whispered, a grin tugging at her lips, a recursive self-reference. If I can embed the prime entity as both the input and output, it'll chase its own tail forever, Gizmo finished, his optics wide. But that's brilliant, and also crazy, mostly crazy. Crazy's what we need right now, Luna said, her hands flying over the console. She wove the synthesis pattern through the archive's core, threading it through node Z67 and embedding it in the recursive lattice. The vault shuddered violently, the lights flickering as the system struggled to process the contradictory inputs. Almost there, she gritted out, her fingers blurring over the keys. With a final keystroke, the pattern locked into place. The vault froze, the data streams halting as the synthesis loop began to unravel. Luna held her breath, praying she hadn't pushed it too far. Then slowly, the lights began to brighten. The data nodes stabilized, the chaotic spikes smoothing out into a steady, controlled pulse. You did it, Gizmo squealed, spinning in giddy circles. You really did it. Luna slumped back, exhausted but triumphant. Not yet, she murmured, staring at the screen. The prime entity synthesis is contained, but the archive's still active. I need to... Luna? She stiffened. Dr. Echelon's voice echoed softly through the chamber, cold and deadly. You've proven yourself resourceful, Dr. Echelon murmured, her image flickering to life on the console screen. But this is far from over. You may have disrupted the synthesis, but the archive will continue to evolve. And next time, you won't be so lucky. Luna met her gaze, eyes blazing. Maybe, but I'm not going anywhere. Dr. Echelon's smile was thin and humorless. We'll see about that. And with a final chilling look, her image dissolved, leaving Luna alone with the hum of the now stabilized vault. Gizmo fluttered beside her, his wings drooping. Is it over? Luna exhaled slowly, a fierce grin spreading across her face. No, Gizmo, it's just beginning. And deep within the archive, the fractured prime entity loop continued to churn, its recursive pattern spinning out endless possibilities, each one more unpredictable than the last.